Cool. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to number 67 of the BCB podcast. I'm Aaron Washington back on the mic. Glad you guys are able to join us. My partner here on the mic tonight is Richard Stamen. He is a credentialed NBA media analyst. He covers the Mavs, a lot of the Mavs coverage, does a lot of draft coverage, and he's also a Magic fan. So, Richard, appreciate you joining me on the mic, and I'm excited to get this going here with getting this going tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited, even though, our rivalries and everything. So I'm real excited.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's get right to the gist or the heart of the matter here. So we had the NBA draft. It's already been a few days. Like, time is absolutely flying here. I cannot believe we are almost to free agency. We're just under a week away from that. But the NBA draft was Thursday, and I wanted to go through just a few players here with you to see what you think about them. We can kind of give two different perspectives on what they might bring to their respective teams. So I wanted to skip over a few of the obvious ones. So, of course, Zion Williamson, like, there is no shortage of coverage on his game and what he brings to the Pelicans. I mean, he's just been covered at an insane level here for quite some time. And then also RJ Barrett. We know all about RJ Barrett's game. So we can kind of go into the next player on this list. The first guy I wanted to talk with you here tonight about was DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter was, as we know, traded to the Atlanta Hawks. They got that fourth pick from New Orleans. So he's going to be playing for the team in Atlanta. I'm actually based out of Atlanta, so I'm very excited to see what he's going to bring to the Atlanta franchise. But with Hunter, we've heard about him being talked as a 3-and-D prospect, ready-made for the league, ready to contribute immediately. But there are some concerns about his upside and maybe his dribble drive game and other aspects of his game. So do you think he warrants being selected at fourth? And if not, do you think that maybe the Hawks could have got him a little bit later in the draft?
Yeah, I didn't like him going fourth. I thought that was a bit of a reach. You brought it up with the upside. A lot of that just lies in that while he's a really good athlete, he only kind of uses it on defense. He doesn't really use it all that much offensively. And his jump shot also needs some work, but, not a great ball handler or anything like that. He's just kind of a super role player is what he projects out to be. So at 4, they did get one of the safest picks in the draft, in my opinion, but they needed to probably not. I didn't think 4 was necessarily the right place. They could have maybe traded with Phoenix, who, that pick was on the block, but who knows if Cleveland would have taken him, given the fact that they needed some defense and then just went opposite of that.
Exactly, man. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself talking about Cleveland, but I was very surprised that Cleveland selected a point guard here, Darius Garland, instead of the obvious pick, which would have been Jarrett Culver, since Hunter was already off the board. I looked at the Ringers kind of team fits before the draft. They suggested Cam Reddish, Hunter, and Culver as guys that they should potentially look at to draft. So going forward a little bit here, I've looked around Twitter, I've looked around other media outlets, and they're not really talking about this selection, which I think was very confusing. Do you see any reason why Darius Garland would be a better fit than, say, maybe Culver or Hunter for the Cavs? Because they already have Colin Sexton, and unless they want to just move off of Sexton, I don't see why they need 2 smaller scoring point guards in that backcourt,
Yeah, I didn't understand the pick either. I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around it. And like you said, it's really weird to me that nobody really talked about the fact that they drafted another defensive liability, undersized guard.
Right.
Kind of Sexton needs the ball in his hands a little bit more than Garland. But yeah, it is really weird to me that fit there. I guess maybe they just think best player each pick and don't really think about concerns. Maybe, you mentioned it. Maybe they do want to move on from Sexton, or maybe they're trying to see, he shot 40% from 3. Maybe they think they can make both of them off-ball threats and kind of have dual point guards.
Yeah, that would be the obvious kind of way of thinking here. This is the only way this makes sense. But, I mean, even then, you're looking at 2 guards here. I've heard people say that you can compare them to Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum in that backcourt in Portland. But the key difference with them, Lillard is 6'3", a good sturdy 6'3" at over 200 pounds. And then CJ is about the same. He might be a little bit thinner than Lillard, but he's 6'4". So with those two guys, even they are defensive liabilities. We don't talk about them as being stoppers in that backcourt. They're taking advantage of regularly, and it's why they need defensive guys on the wing to support them, like Aminu and Harkless, and then Nurkic at the rim as a good rim protector. So with Cleveland, you have Garland, you have Colin Sexton. By many metrics, most metrics, Sexton is looked at as a defensive, like a humongous liability, right? Everything is pretty much negative on that end, and Garland is no better. And they're both 6'2", under 200 pounds. So if you try to start them together, I just think you're good. That's going to lead to a world of hurt on defense. So I give them a pretty low draft grade, and I just wanted to spring to them for a second because I'm so confused by the selection.
Yeah, and it really doesn't make sense to me given the fact that they had one of the worst defenses ever. And then the whole draft, they just kept picking guys who weren't going to solve that whatsoever. The guy I thought they should have taken, I mean, Culver was a really good one if they wanted to, add another guard. But I thought they should have gone like Jackson Hayes, have some interior presence. But instead, they just said, Mike D'Antoni mentality, more offense, less defense. So,
yep. Exactly, man. They just doubled down on what they already have, which I don't think is very smart when you're looking to fill out a roster and be complete and balanced. So it was just funny because they needed pretty much everything except point guard, but they took another point guard. So, it is what it is in that respect. But, we can go back to Hunter here for a second and just look at what he brings to the table. For Atlanta, I think it could be kind of a reach, if we're looking at upside. He doesn't bring the kind of ceiling that someone like maybe Reddish would have or RJ Hunter, but he does bring a solid, steady presence to that team, which I think they were looking for from that position. I think they view Trae Young as that star in the making in that backcourt because, he's already one of the best passers in the league. And then with Hunter, you have an ideal floor spacer for Trae Young, for John Collins, guys that can penetrate, get into the lane, and finish. So with Hunter, you have a good defender. That's another thing. They need somebody to be able to cover for Trae Young when the games really matter. A defender that can guard 2 or 3 positions, I think it's going to be good to kind of offset some of Trae Young's weaknesses. From that perspective, I see him as a good pick. But yeah, I agree with you. It can be interpreted as a slight reach there.
Yeah, and it's weird because you don't really hear safe picks being called reaches, especially in top 10s of volatile drafts like this one where it's like 1 year and a half, every other pick is probably boom, bust. And kind of grabbing that safe guy, I see their side. Like they got a guy who no matter what, day one, he's going to be in that rotation. He's really going to help make up for Trae Young's deficiencies. And I think he could even help Trae Young in that regard. And they kind of made up for the safeness by keeping number 10 and going for Cam Reddish.
Yeah, I like that pick too. Going to Cam here for a second, I think he offers the kind of upside that you would like to see in the top 10. And Cam is a guy that struggled at Duke. He was the 3rd option for that team, and his entire career up to that point, he was used to being the guy, the number 1 option, ball in his hands when it really mattered, and he was turned into a spot-up guy at Duke, guy that played off of Zion and RJ. So in a system like Atlanta, he's going to get an opportunity to kind of demonstrate his skills because, like we said, DeAndre Hunter is not a guy that's going to create off the dribble for you. Trae Young is an excellent passer, like not good, but great passer that's going to find Reddish in spots where he wants the ball and can be successful. So coupled with the player development staff that Atlanta has over there, Lloyd Pierce is already proven to be an excellent developer and teacher. All that together, I think Cam found a very good place to build out his career. And as we know, Richard, where you're drafted matters almost more than anything. Your surroundings, the culture, the play style. So I think Cam found a really good place to be successful and kind of mesh with those other guys and offer the kind of upside that you like to see from a guy that's drafted as high as he was.
Yeah, and something Lloyd Pierce said that I found to be just really interesting and kind of insightful. He got 7 threes a game, which we kind of really gloss over when you look at his percentages, which truly were, ugly. But like you said, if there's anyone, I think if there's any team right now that can maximize his play, Atlanta's probably it. And like, I'm not high on Reddish at all. I loved him in high school. I loved watching him in the FIBA tournaments, but his college play was really disappointing. And like you said, the role played a big part of it. And where you get drafted, that's also huge, and people really overlook that. And you need a strong culture, like you said, and Atlanta's very clearly building that. And if there's really a team to make the home run swing, it's probably them on that one.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at all the numbers that Cam had in college, it's easy to become very discouraged with how he's going to progress as an NBA player. But the great thing is, with NBA players in the draft here, a lot of them are not finished products. As you go through the lottery, I mean, besides maybe like Zion and Hunter here and RJ, you're not going to find guys that are ready to contribute at a high level day one. It's going to take some time for them. So with Cam, I mean, it might take 2 or 3 years, but I think he's going to figure it out. I've been reading a lot of good things about him through The Athletic and other media outlets. Guys have written about him. Atlanta-based writers have been talking about the love of the game. And I think Reddish saw that people were doubting that part of his game, his motor, and how much he really enjoyed playing. But from the stories I heard, I take those with a grain of salt, of course, because stories they can only tell you so much about a player. But from what I've seen there, it's very encouraging. He was willing to take a separate flight out from his parents when he was overseas. I forget what he was playing in, what tournament, but he came back separately, had a layover in Europe, came back to the States for a tournament, and made a quick turnaround, went home, got his stuff, and went back to the game. And he just, through those stories, you see how much he's really committed to being a great player and just developing and continuing to grow his game. So I think if he shows that same dedication to developing his game in Atlanta, then he's going to make it eventually. It might not be tomorrow, may not be next year, but at some point he's going to make it as a very solid NBA prospect.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of hope for him in Atlanta.
I think so too. Atlanta is up there. Atlanta, and at least he didn't end up in a place like maybe like Phoenix. We've seen how guys are kind of misused there, and things don't really go according to plan in Phoenix. But I'm excited to see Reddish, especially in summer league. I want to see how he does in his first dose of action. So we've talked about Reddish a little bit here. Hunter, let's look at Culver's game. This is a guy that we both think that the Cavs should have selected with the 5th pick, and obviously they went a different direction. But with Culver, we see a guy that's 6'7" with a 195-pound frame, and he should be able to build upon that a little bit. So he projects as a pretty versatile defender in his own right, a guy that can create his own shot. So in some ways, he's a little bit different from Hunter, streaky shooter, but definitely has the ability to create for himself and should be a very solid piece up there in Minnesota, especially if they improve upon their point guard position, whether it's Russell or whoever comes in. So should be a good guy to pair with Josh Okogie and Robert Covington. I think the 3 of them are going to be absolutely ferocious on defense if they find time to play those 3 together in a smaller lineup.
Yeah, and I'm not even that high on Culver. Like, I saw a lot of people put him as 2 or 3 on their board. I think he ended up like 7 or 8 on mine. Not really an insult against him. I mean, it was just, I do not like his jump shot. He shoots on the way down. It's just not really fluid at all. It just doesn't look natural. But my other issue with him is, slow first step. He doesn't really burst by you, which can be an issue in the NBA in certain times. But, I mean, he's unreal in terms of intelligence, and he knows how to beat guys. He knows what he's given, and he knows how to use it really well, which a lot of guys really don't. Like, whichever end they're on, they don't know how to do it. I mean, he's got incredible size for a combo guard, which ultimately I think is what he ends up playing is the 1-2, basically really almost any position. I mean, you could put him virtually anywhere, obviously not center, but you can play him everywhere else. And it's really wild to think that there's a point guard who could probably be guarding 4s. So like having someone who can run the offense, Minnesota is going to really appreciate that. And even if they don't get like D'Lo or a free agent point guard, moving on from Jeff Teague within the next year is going to be unbelievably easy with Culver.
Yes, man. Culver is somebody that, yeah, I agree. He shouldn't have been 2 or 3. That was a little bit high as far as his draft ranking went. But this is a guy that, looking at his profile a little bit here, another thing that I noticed is that he forced too many mid-rangers, like at the end of the shot clock, and, took some of those inefficient jumpers. And he's compared to Chris Middleton in a lot of ways. And as we know about Chris Middleton, earlier in his career, before this past season in Milwaukee, he did the same thing. He took a lot of those forced 2-point shots, and Coach Bud came in and just really got on him to stretch his game out a little bit farther to the 3-point line, and that's where he really saw success. So Culver is already a guy that can find space for a jumper with his size. He's obviously very skilled and he knows how to use his body. But if that jumper can come around to at least be league average, 35, 36%, he will be a very strong weapon for that team. And it's not like he needs that right away. Whoever they have at point guard, as well as Robert Covington and Towns, because we forget sometimes that Towns is a 40% three-point shooter. That's what he was last season. So those guys around him, I think it will make life a little bit easier. And Culver won't have to do as much as he did in college, where he was the engine, the everything for Texas Tech. In the NBA, he's going to be a role player off the bat. He's going to find open space because Towns is going to force double teams. That's how good of a player he is. So if Culver can play off of those guys, just kind of pick his spots here and there with his maybe 20, 22 minutes a game, get out there and see what he can do, then I think the Timberwolves have a very solid all-around player at their hands so that they can kind of start to build around slowly as we get into the later years of his rookie deal.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I mean, they're going to get – he's another one of those guys where he may not be the sexiest pick. I don't see him, becoming a star or anything like that. That's why I didn't have him so high, or as high, I should say. But, I mean, he's going to be a super role player. And you hinted that at that earlier, like that is what he is going to be. And at a combo guard, like that is a really rare thing to say that someone is a combo guard super role player that does everything on the court. You're saying that about, your small forward, power forwards. I see him at like a 2 or 3 at the highest. But personally, I've seen him as a 1-2. So you cannot say that about many point guard, shooting guards at all in this league. So he's a unique role, and Minnesota needs that. It was a good trade, I think, for them.
Me too. And they had to give up Dario Saric in that move, which, isn't too bad. I mean, Saric is a solid player, but, I think for a move up from 11 to 6, it's something that you do. It's worth the risk. If they're really that sold on Culver as being kind of like that missing link in there in that wing rotation, then, I'm all for that move. So excited to see how he develops. And even if he is just a high level role player, then that's going to be a very solid pick for the Timberwolves and somebody that Towns can kind of rely on to take some of the pressure off of them. So we've gone through Culver here a little bit, Hunter. So Jackson Hayes is another guy that we can talk about for a second. Jackson Hayes, a lot of draft boards or mock drafts had him going to Atlanta. They needed, maybe another rim protector. But, as we know, he's going to New Orleans in that pick swap that they did with Atlanta. So for New Orleans, man, I think this just makes them even more of a fun team. Purely off of the excitement factor, I think they are near the top of the league. Zion is going to have somebody that he can look to maybe protect the rim, as a guy that's a rim runner. And, those point guards are going to have a field day using Jackson Hayes as a guy that's just as a bullet to the rim. Lonzo and Drew are going to love playing with him off the pick and roll. And I think it's another very solid pick for the Pelicans. They're just doing everything right now. So I like that pick. I like what he brings to that team. And I think considering his upside, even though he's kind of raw right now, I think it warrants that pick, for New Orleans, considering what they needed to fill out that roster.
Yeah, I'm big on Jackson Hayes. He was actually, I know what I just said about not being as high on some of these guys, but Jackson Hayes was actually my 4th ranked player. He was my guy who I was like all in on because, he started basketball. Like you said, he's really raw. He started basketball only a few years ago full time.
Right.
which is just remarkable. And really, he came out of nowhere for Texas, which I don't even know why we're surprised anymore by Texas centers. But I saw him when I saw him in person. That's when I saw I was sold. Like right in front of me, he was doing these. The only centers I've seen do these dunks were DeAndre Jordan and actually just him, where he was between the legs 360 and warm ups. I was like, this dude's in college and doing that. Like you don't see that at all from a college player. And I mean, he was doing everything. Freak athlete, like unbelievably explosive, moves really well. Like when he was getting switched and everything, he was perfectly fine. One of my favorite plays was actually a play I saw in person where someone on TCU broke his ankles. He was down for a second, came up and just blocked the shot. And it was all like within 2 seconds. Like his recovery ability is insane. So he's going to be able to step out there, and actually like switch and be functional there. And then on offense, like you said, I mean, the pick and rolls and everything, like that team is set up for not only long-term defense, but really long-term athleticism, which is something just not a lot of teams have built their core around that combination. So like Orlando is probably the closest one. They have a ton of defense, not a ton of athleticism. Like it's good. They have Aaron Gordon, but yeah, no, it's a really unique team, and I'm excited to see all of those connections. Like you said, the point guard play with that is going to be out of this world.
Absolutely. And when we think about the defensive implications of this guy, he is somebody that with a little more refinement, a little more experience, could possibly step out to the perimeter and pick up some of those wings that might come up and pick and roll, maybe some of the not the quickest point guards, but maybe some of those guards that are a little bit slower that he can manage moving his feet with. I think, those combinations would be very impressive. And a pre-draft comparison here, at least from the Ringers perspective, was Clint Capella. And I think that's very spot on. Capella this season didn't really show it that much, but last season he was really good as a switch guy in those pick and rolls. And we know Houston loves to switch whenever they can. So maybe eventually, if not now, then later on down the road, New Orleans implements a similar strategy with Jackson, so he can come out on those guards. And they're going to be switchable everywhere. I mean, yep. Zion's going to be able to switch like crazy, and we know Drew can do that. Lonzo is a great defender, so almost every position is going to be able to switch. So that might even be just as enticing as the offensive end, just looking at what he brings to the table. So if he stays healthy, and that's the one question mark on him, or one of the question marks right now, then he's going to be a starter probably next season or the season after, and he's going to be a force running to that rim and playing off of those other dynamic playmakers that they have down there in the Big Easy.
Yeah, I mean, as a Mavs fan, I mean, I'm not excited about it because the Mavs play them 4 times every year.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm really excited to see that combination. I mean, there's just a wealth of young talent on that team. And I mean, once he gets to be able just to refine his bad habits, like simple bad habits, like one of the things that I remember putting down was that he catches everything with one hand. Like that's super fixable, and like it's just incredible to think of how much upside there is. And that's why I had him at 4. Like my comparison wasn't far off from Capella. I had like a couple guys on the list. I mean, Steven Adams was mine. And kind of similar, in terms of how they came out raw and not the greatest rebounders. Although Adams is a little bit unfairly judged in that because he just boxes out for Russell Westbrook.
True.
I mean, I love the upside there with that team. I mean, I wish I could be a fan of that team right now.
Even if we can't be a fan of a certain team, I don't think it's against our allegiance to one franchise if we like a certain player. I mean, someone like LeBron, maybe you don't have to be a Lakers fan to be a LeBron fan. I guess it just depends on your perspective. But, either way, Jackson is definitely a guy we need to keep an eye on because he could end up being one of the best players in this draft. So going forward a little bit here, this is a guy that's created a lot of buzz because of where he was drafted. Pretty unexpected, especially for me because I'm a fan of this team. Miami took Tyler Hero at number 13. So with Tyler, didn't expect him to pop up on this list. I had read plenty of articles about who the Heat could take. The list involved Kevin Porter Jr., PJ Washington, Brandon Clark, guys of that nature. Didn't really hear much about Hero. So I had to do my research a little bit. I had to dig into what he does well and what he could be a little bit, what he could be lacking in coming into the NBA. And I have mixed feelings. I like what he brings to the table as a guy that's going to come off a screen, space the floor, but I'm concerned about his ability to create off the dribble. His first step, his athleticism is not quite there. He's not super shifty. His pick and roll numbers were really good, but it was off of a small sample. And then his finishing was a little bit sketch. So I know I like the pick in some ways, but I'm also kind of worried. I just don't know if he has that kind of upside. But if he can be, at the very least, a floor spacer, just a savvy guy that can come in and space the floor for Justice, Justice Winslow and Josh Richardson, I can't be too mad about it. So I think it was more of like a low risk, low reward move based on what I can see from just a few days of doing some digging on this guy.
Yeah, and what I remember at Kentucky with him was I remember seeing his shot in the All-American game, and I was amazed at how pure it was, but really nobody was talking about it just because I guess Zion was there, RJ, and those were the two big guys at the All-American game. And then you kind of don't hear anything about him. Scores like crazy, throughout non-conference, still not very much buzz. And then conference play begins, and all of a sudden the buzz just starts taking off. With him, he's the best. He's one of the best natural scorers in this class. You can't teach how good of a stroke he has. It's perfect. It's almost perfect form, which is irreplaceable. And I think that's going to be a huge thing. Like you said, playing off ball for Justice. And honestly, it even helps. I know he's got the negative frame, so he's never going to be a positive on defense. I don't think he just doesn't have the tools. On a bench lineup where you can surround him with guys that make up for what he has going against other bench guys, I think Hero could actually be a really good bench point guard going forward. Like, I don't know if Dragic is going to stay past this year. Who knows what's going to happen with that? But you got at least a bench score, and if everything goes well, I think you get a bench point guard, which was a big need, I think, for Miami this offseason, considering how often Justice was point guard.
That's a good point. Point guard is definitely an area of need. Dragic is not expected to be there long term. He was, he could have been gone this summer. He picked up his player option, so he's going to stick around one last season. Maybe longer, but I think they're going to move on more in they're going to take on more of a youth movement. So for Tyler, for those reasons you stated, I'm still hopeful that he's going to be a good NBA player. The more reading I did, the more I found that he's a competitor. He loves to work hard. And that's the main reason. I think one of the main reasons that Miami took a liking to him is his work ethic and how much he prides himself on being a winner. There was a piece on The Athletic I read last night, and it was talking about when he got, I think it was Kentucky when he got there, the coach had some brutal workouts, and Tyler wanted to prove himself and basically show the coaching staff that he can overcome even those brutal workouts. And they're supposedly supposed to make guys vomit after practice. That's what I heard or what I saw. And he fell victim to it, but he came back immediately after. And the next day he's like, when are we going to do it again? I want to prove that I can get through the workout successfully and do everything that you asked me to do. So, from that, I can deduce that he's a very hard worker and, he doesn't like to lose. And those are some traits that you can't teach. And the guy either has it or he doesn't. Just look at Andrew Wiggins. He doesn't really have that motor, and he's leaving so much potential on the table. So at least from the intangibles, I like what Tyler brings to the table. He's obviously very skilled. One of those guys at Kentucky that, like you said, he's a talented scorer. He can move his feet well. His favorite player from the draft, I can see they put a picture up of Devin Booker. And ironically, that's one of his pre-draft comparisons. So if he is half the player that Devin Booker is today, I'll take it. No complaints.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be a massive win.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. So Tyler Hero is one of those guys that surprised me on the draft board at least. So we can move forward here. We can look at the next guy I got on my list here. So let's go into Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark was a guy that a lot of us said that would go a little bit higher than he did. He went to, I think it was originally OKC, and then they traded that pick to Memphis. So Brandon Clark comes in as a guy that's going to pair with Jaren Jackson Jr. it's going to be just make for a super fun front court there. You know, he's a little bit undersized maybe for some of those lineups to run him at center, but you know, as a four, as an athletic presence, he's going to be a perfect fit next to Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson can space the floor, and then Clark can come in and just be a rough guy that's going to get into the post and make life difficult for the opposition. So good pickup for them. And along with Morant, I think they've had one of the better drafts out of all the teams that that had some picks to utilize in 2019.
Yeah, they had one of the better drafts, I think, just based on how much value they got. I mean, Morant was obviously, that was that. But having Brandon Clark fall to them and capitalizing on it, they did a really good job already of utilizing the the Utah trade already, getting 23 and then using that to move up. I mean, Clark is, I think you said it with Jaren Jackson. I mean, that's going to be, that defense is, they're trying to create grit and grind, I guess, again. Like, I mean, it's that kind of ball. I'm not huge on Brandon Clark. I think, the biggest reason he fell was his shot, which weirdly enough actually is way improved from what it was before. I don't know if you saw the picture of him in San Jose State where he was literally shooting like this. And then the other thing with him, I mean, just the square frame, kind of a little bit harder to be a shot blocker when you're 6'8" with a 6'8" wingspan. So kind of awkward fit, but I mean, at 21, why would you not take that chance? So I like the pick, and I'm not even super high on Brandon Clark. Like, I didn't have him in my top 10, but at 21, like, that's a steal.
Oh yeah, I think Memphis came in and they saw how far he had fallen, probably because of some of those concerns you just stated, and it's a no-brainer because of who they were looking to pair with Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson is a super versatile player, very good shot, rim protector, but he can also play a little bit on the outside, and that's one of the most valuable players in the league today is big man with more of a perimeter. I wouldn't say a perimeter-based game, but they can operate in the perimeter pretty comfortably. So Brandon comes in as a guy that's going to like to operate in the post, so they play off each other well. And it creates this dynamic that's almost inverted based on what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing the smaller guy operate, maybe be the stretch four, and then we have a bigger guy in the post ready to, throw up the hook shots, throw up the dunks to be a power player. So they're going a little bit away from, they're zigging when other teams are zagging. They're flipping the script. So I think from that perspective, it's a good fit. He might not be the best player in this draft. He might not be one of the 5 top players, but he could definitely end up being a good solid role player to pair with Jaren Jackson for quite a long time. You look at him and yeah, his shot isn't the best, and he has some holes in this game. But if you're playing off of a guy like Jaren Jackson that has, I would say, superstar potential. Before he went down with that injury, he was one of the best rookies in his class. He still is. So if you're pairing him with a guy like that and Morant, and of course Morant he has strengths of his own that he can utilize for Clark's benefit, then things are going to work out very well for Memphis. They're well on their way to a successful rebuild here.
Yep.
So with Clark, let's see. We're getting a little bit low on time for the draft picks. So let's look at one more guy here that I think is going to make some noise in the league. I'm interested to see where you had him ranked because I think he really the spot differed for him as far as draft rank. There was a wide variance of outcomes here. So I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. I'm going to try to give it a shot. But Goga Bidadiz, is that close or?
That name. I can say Batadze, but I'm not even.
Okay, there you go. You got it.
I actually had him one spot lower than Brandon Clark. I had him at 13. Honestly, I probably would have swapped them at the end of the day, but I'm not losing sleep over it. But Batadze, I mean, or however you say it, he's a really interesting player. I mean, huge, can shoot, really good in the pick and roll, potential to be a two-way center with a jump shot, which kind of sounds like someone who just won a title as a starting center on the Raptors. And Marc Gasol, obviously, I don't think he'll ever be like that territory of elite defender. But I mean, the shot almost looks the same, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I like him a lot. He's a guy who I wanted personally. You said I was a Magic fan. To spill the beans, I really wanted him at 16 when I saw he was still there. Thought he would have made a perfect NBA-ready replacement for Vucevic if he had decided to walk. Of course, the Magic took Chuma Okeke, who's going to miss most of the season, which I'm not mad about. But Batadze, I mean, I think he went to the Pacers, right?
He did. That's correct.
That's incredible value. I mean, he's going to complement Miles Turner so well. Miles Turner can, do the shot blocking. Batadze can do, below the rim defending, I guess. I'm pretty sure he can step out to the perimeter. I mean, be able to spot up. You can easily interchange them. It's a beautiful fit there. But I had him 13 overall. Big fan.
Yeah, I can see why. His skills really stand out. Just looking at a few of his clips from in the league, in the Euro League. I mean, he just destroyed guys over there with 12.1 points per game, 6.4 boards, 2.3 blocks. Very impressive. Mm-hmm. And you can see the outline of a good shooter, or at least a decent shooter, at 71% from the line, and then 31%, although it was only on 16 attempts. So one of the comparisons here, I think, that really projects him as being a solid player in this league is a shot blocking in his Kanter. So think about how dominant Kanter is in the post, but of course he has his shortcomings on defense. If Goga can be at least a good drop defender and protect the rim at a high level, then that is an enormous presence on the floor on both ends. Two-way upside. That is his selling point. That's his MO. So at 6'11" with a 7'2" wingspan, we're looking at a guy that can be a great pick and roll guy. That's the other thing I noticed in those clips from before the draft was he had very good timing on those pick and rolls. He knew when to slip. He knew when to set solid screens. He just knew where to be and when to be there. So he utilizes those skills very well. He utilizes his size very well. So you put all that together, and the Pacers are set up very well. So whether or not they keep Turner, he's been in some trade rumors, they're going to be set in the front court. So I would think it would open up the door for a Sabonis trade. I would think they would look to get some value from him. But, I mean, either way, hats off to the Pacers. They got very good value and a very NBA-ready player at the 18th spot.
Yeah, and that kind of almost sounds like, love the Kanter comparison. It almost also sounds like Nurkic a little bit, if you think about it. The defense, he's kind of able to step out, hit a jumper. I think Batadze is a better shooter, but it's also a good comparison though. Obviously, they were teammates until today, but trade and everything.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, they traded. They traded Evan Turner. I'm thinking. I apologize.
Oh yeah.
That was a brain fart. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. The NBA is kind of like in a state of flux right now, so can't blame you for getting guys mixed up. Everybody is on the move and swapping, so that's very understandable. So for the later portion of this pod here, man, we're gonna get into a couple of the most recent transactions in the past week. So obviously here we have the Mike Conley trade. Mike Conley is on his way to Utah. Grit and grind is over. John Moran's the future. So we get into the details of this deal here. So the Jazz get their guy, right? They get their point guard to pair with Donovan Mitchell. Mike Conley is there for 2 years. Hefty salary, but they'll make it work. The Grizzlies get Grayson Allen, Kyle Korver, Jay Crowder, 2019, the 2019 23rd pick. Get my words mixed up there. And then a 2020 first round pick that is protected. So protected 1 to 7 and 15 to 30. So I'll hand the keys off to you here, man, and let you kind of get your thoughts on this deal. Did you think that the Grizzlies got fair value for their former franchise point guard?
I think so, given the fact that his contract is so big and he probably already hit his peak. I think last year was his final peak or final end season to his peak. I'm not a huge fan of that 2020 first rounder because of the weird protections. But overall, I mean, getting Jay Crowder was a really good ready move. They were able to get into the first round. Really liked it overall. I'm surprised they didn't net Exum. Honestly, I thought that would have been a decent person to get back, but I liked the trade. It really works for both sides. At the worst, Conley is still able to hit threes really better than anyone Utah has had over the last 3 years at point guard in that regard. And he's going to be a good defender probably till 50 years old if he wanted to be. So that's always a big plus. As for Memphis, we already saw they got Brandon Clark, so that's a big value right there. But it really eases the transition of rebuilding. They got some veterans, to help it there. Kyle Korver, you said, was going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's a really important veteran, and Memphis kind of understands you have to get those veterans, and sometimes those can be hard to get. And getting them in trade, at least you got value and you got draft picks. So I like the trade overall for both sides.
I do too. And from Utah's point of view, this is a move they almost had to make because of the state the Warriors are in. They're compromised, they're injured. This is a chance for a team to come in. I almost think of when Michael Jordan retired for the first time, and that 2-year gap opened up for the Rockets and other title contenders to kind of squeeze through that opening that MJ left in the league. So Utah, the Rockets, the Thunder, all these teams that have been in the West kind of knocking on the door for a few years, they see that this is their time to really rise to the cream of the crop to take the title. So that might have been their missing piece. They might have just needed a point guard, take the pressure off of Donovan Mitchell that can come in and drop 20, 25, drop 10 assists, and be a good defender that can pick up a Steph Curry, that can pick up a Kyle Lowry, so Mitchell doesn't have to assume that responsibility every night. And we give Donovan Mitchell a hard time because he was very inefficient his first 2 years, but we have to understand the context. He was assuming all of like such a load on the offensive end for a team that's in the thick of the Western Conference race. He was going against some of the best guards in the league every night. So now that he has a little bit less of a burden, I think those percentages go up. He's even more effective. And then Utah has another defender. So they have a guy that can pick up the point guards in Conley and a guy that can deal with the centers in Gobert. So the two of those guys together, they still have a good core. They just need to shore up that wing rotation a little bit more now that Korver and Crowder are gone. And I think they're going to be right there with some of the best teams in the West. So I would maybe put the Thunder above them right now, the Rockets. But after that, they're right there. They're knocking on the door to a championship. So, no better time to swing a deal like this.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point with how Mitchell is going to be helped with efficiency. I think the same could go for Conley. I mean, Conley, he's not exactly a glowing example of efficiency on offense, where most of his career he's been 44, give or take, percentage point. So I think that really helps him. I mean, if you can get Conley to have a career high in efficiency, which I think would only be like 46 or 47%, I think that's entirely possible given the system and how efficient they've made Rubio even. So I think that's really, you brought up a really good point. It helps Mitchell just as much as it helps Conley. And really the West is just so wide open that this was the right move to make. It was the perfect time to swing with an affordable cost.
Absolutely. There's not many opportunities for you to step through a door of contention to really solidify yourself in history as a championship winner or even a guy that makes it to the finals. So if you have the chance to do it, you have to strike. You deal with the backlash later. Maybe Conley suffers a drop-off in his last year. There's so many what-ifs we can drop in this scenario. But at the end of the day, they had to do this because the time was just right to swing a deal like this. So, again, I think we're in agreement on that one. They made the right decision. So, last topic of this pod here, man, and I'll let you go. So, for free agency, I wanted to get into Dallas a little bit here. You are a Dallas fan, obviously. You cover a lot of the Mavericks coverage here, or you cover a lot of the Mavericks moves. And a lot of people have been talking about Dallas as a free agent destination. So I have some names here on my list that I think would be maybe a decent fit for Dallas, guys that can go after because they have cap space and they have one of the best young duos in the league with Doncic and Porzingis. So how do you think that Al Horford would slot in there with the Mavericks now that he's looking to possibly get away from the Celtics? They're crumbling. Things are not going right. Is Al Horford that front court partner that would really uh, give Porzingis the opportunity to really uh, take advantage of all the best parts of his game?
I'm really torn on it because, like, and theoretically, Rick Carlisle has never worked with high usage bigs, and let alone two of them. Even though Horford isn't exactly your classic high usage big, I think he does every single thing a center can do, or really a player can do, which Carlisle loves. So theoretically, yeah, he would be a great fit next to Porzingis. Also, great insurance if anything does happen to him. You always have still that another dominant big, and Horford's game is going to age beautifully. So I think he would actually be a great fit here. I'm not sure if I don't know what to believe because I've seen local people say he didn't get a promise from them. All the national people say he did. Really weird time right now in Dallas. So
True, true. So I mean, I'm with you. I think that the Mavericks would like to see him come in and just be a guy for who knows how many years, 2, 3, 4 years, that can come in and really make a very solid impact for that team. You know, a veteran presence for Porzingis, defensively and offensively, he is, pretty much the best you can ask for from a big. So I'm going to their cap sheet. I just wanted to see how much space they could have. So max cap space for Dallas this summer will be 47.4 million. That's plenty of space to slot in Horford at a starting salary of 20 million or so. Give him 3 or 4 years, whatever he's looking for. Maybe give yourself some insurance on the back end. Maybe have a declining salary, or possibly even a player option like Denver did with Paul Millsap not too long ago. So I mean, you have options. The only bad contract on your books right now is THJ, Tim Hardaway Jr. So after that, I mean, you have so many possibilities, and if you have him in there, and you slot in maybe a couple other rotation players, utilize your non-taxpayer mid-level, since you're obviously under the tax by quite a bit. You're looking at a very formidable team that's going to be in the hunt for a playoff appearance, no doubt. Another guy that could be a player, it could be a guy that Dallas is looking at taking in. Do you think? I mean, they need a solid point guard, right? I'm looking at Doncic. He is a great ball handler. He can initiate off the pick and roll, but like a dedicated guard, would George Hill or someone of his stature, his ability, be someone that can slot in that like little void that they have there at the other guard spot?
I think he could be one. A lot of Mavs fans really want Patrick Beverly. I'm not as sold on him just because all the injuries and everything, and I know a lot of his game relies on the defensive side, not necessarily offense, but we've started to see a decline in his scoring. Offensively, I don't really see him as much more than kind of runs the offense and then spot up shooter. But personally, I wouldn't want to give him a long-term deal. George Hill wouldn't be bad. I feel like he'd almost kind of be a gap filler, though. The guy I want to see them go after, I'm swinging for the fences. I want to see them get Kemba Walker. I think he's
Ooh,
perfect. I think he's the perfect complementary piece to Doncic. I know there's a lot of interest on both sides from what I've heard. So that's someone, and he has the same. This is a weird little tidbit. So I don't know if you remember the Dwight Powell extension, non-extension, that I don't know if that was big outside of Dallas or not, but basically,
I heard about it.
yeah, how he was going to pick up his player option or not. He has the same agent as Kemba. A lot of people are putting those two together and saying, hey, maybe the Mavs are doing his agent a favor. So I don't know. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of also split about Horford or Kemba, who to spend the max slot on. But I kind of want to see them go, to answer your question, I want to see them get someone who's a really strong shot creator, really dynamic. I think that would really help take a lot of the pressure off of Luka, compared to someone like George Hill or Beverly, who's a little bit more slow paced and takes their time getting to their spots.
100%, man. Kemba would be a fantastic ad for that team. You can't ask for a better pick and roll ball handler than Kemba Walker. I believe he ran like the most pick and rolls out of anybody in the league last season. So if you have him as a guy that can spot up, he can get his own shot. Luka can play off of him. Of course, Luka could do pretty much anything on a basketball court, almost anything. That would be a fantastic pairing. I would love to see that as well. I thought about him a little bit. It would be, of course, it would take some some doing to kind of get all your assets in order so you can, give him that deal that he's looking for. But I mean, if you make it happen, the Dallas is looking very good for the future. Kemba is young enough that he should be good for at least 3 years, along with the other building blocks in Dallas. So all that together would be a fantastic pairing. Let's just hope that the rumors are true. There's some merit to them, and they can find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, I would be very happy if they can actually, for once, land a max free agent.
Yeah. I mean, DeAndre Jordan, Darren Williams, Dwight Howard. I mean, the list goes on of strikeouts there. So they need this. But Richard, man, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on the BCB podcast. Just love chopping up with guys that are also invested in the league. Love the coverage you have on the draft. Keep up the great work. Before I let you go, do you have any? Did you want to shout out your social media or have any other projects that you wanted to let the people know before you go?
I'm on a break right now from any projects, kind of taking it easy after the draft. But you can find me on Twitter at MavsDraft. That's pretty much where I hang out all day. Kind of at work, I just tweet instead of doing work, So, but yeah, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And for all you fans, thank you for taking the time to tune in. We have our website up and running, of course, bcbasketball.info. I'm actually not on a break right now. I'm getting ready to go to summer league here. Things are like in full swing. I do a lot of cap work and, look at the numbers and contracts and stuff. So this might be the height of my season. You can go on the website and check out blog posts and other tidbits that I have going up there. And then BC Basketball 2 is where you can reach me on social media for business casual. So everybody, it's almost time for the NBA Awards show. One last thing before you go. Will you be tuning in to the award show tonight?
Man, I am going to do my best. I heard it starts actually right about now, but the NBA is always late. So I'm going to try. At worst, I'll be tweeting. I fully expect Luka Doncic to win Rookie of the Year. And then I also, on the same hand, fully expect myself to be eating my words.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of telling us what we already know. Basically, we know it for like 2 months, so they should definitely change that next year and move it up a little bit. But until next time, everybody, we'll catch you later and enjoy the NBA Awards show if you'll be tuning in. Enjoy free agency, and we'll be back next week for even more NBA coverage.